making headlines. President requests the Parliament of Maldives to extend the state of emergency for a period of 30 days. Supreme Court issues an injunction suspending the implementation of points 1 and 4 of its order issued on February 1st. And Ministerial Committee meets with the Chief of the Rule of Law, Equality and Non-Discrimination Branch of OHCHR and UN Resident Coordinator in Maldives.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome you all to PSM News in English. I'm Zinat Hassan here with the news in details. National Security Committee of Parliament approves the request of President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Gayoom to extend the period of state of emergency. President Abdullah Yamin requested the Parliament of Maldives to extend the state of emergency for a period of 30 days. President Yamin declared a state of emergency on February 5th for a period of 15 days. The President submitted the request to extend the initial 15-day state of emergency to 30 days to the extraordinary sitting of the Parliament held outside the normal legislative session. The President requested to grant a 30-day extension to the decree for state of emergency and 2 decrees to revise the original decree. The extraordinary sitting was held with the attendance of 30 parliamentarians after a mass boycott by opposition parliamentarians. The Supreme Court issues an injunction suspending the implementation of points 1 and 4 of its order issued on February 1st. This suspends the decision by the Supreme Court reinstating the 12 members of Parliament disqualified from their seats as a result of floor crossing. The injunction was granted in response to a case submitted by the Attorney General challenging the constitutionality of points 1 and 4 of the Supreme Court order of February 1st. Therefore, the 12 members of Parliament who lost their seats as a result of floor crossing will not regain their parliamentary positions until the Supreme Court has been able to determine the case submitted by the Attorney General. The Supreme Court dismisses the case regarding the validity of the presidential decree implementing a state of emergency in the Maldives. The Supreme Court noted that there were no grounds to presume that the presidential decree issued on February 5th was in contravention to the Constitution of the Maldives. The claimant argued that Article 253 of the Constitution, listing the conditions under which a state of emergency can be declared, was not accurately invoked by the presidential decree. Nonetheless, the declaration did not directly cite the reason for a state of emergency being a threat to national security. The claimant went on to argue that Article 254 regarding the content of the declaration was also not followed, namely that the measures being implemented to address the emergency went beyond what is permissible in the Constitution. However, the claimant's argument relied on a unique interpretation of Article 254 that goes beyond the common understanding of the article and was therefore rejected by the court. The Supreme Court went on to explain its reasoning for why the particular interpretation was inconsistent with its understanding of the Constitution and stated that the presidential decree itself could not be deemed unconstitutional on either of the grounds presented. As per the presidential decree, the state of emergency was enforced to protect the peace and welfare of all citizens and the country following the events that unfolded in relation to the Supreme Court order issued on February 1st, which has resulted in the disruption of the functions of the executive power and the state institutions vested with specific mandates under the Constitution, the re-infringement of national security and public interest, and if implemented, which would potentially lead to an undermining of supremacy of the Constitution. The Ministerial Committee meets with Chief of the Rule of Law, Equality and Non-Discrimination Branch of the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR Mona Rishmawi, and Resident Coordinator for the United Nations in Maldives, Shoko Noda. emphasizing the government was committed to ensuring full transparency with the international community. The Ministerial Committee highlighted its willingness to address any queries or concerns raised by the visiting delegation. It emphasized that, in spite of the difficult situation in the country at present, the delegation will have full access to state institutions and individuals not affected by the state of emergency. The Ministerial Committee and the United Nations delegation discussed the current state of affairs in the Maldives, given the judicial ruling of February 1st, the investigation into the driving factors behind that ruling and the subsequent state of emergency that was decreed. The committee noted that it was only as a final measure and upon the advice of the National Security Council in defense of the Constitution and the democracy enshrined therein that the President decreed the state of emergency. The committee said the exhibited judicial overreach necessitated urgent and decisive action to protect the checks and balances in the Constitution as well as the integrity of the ongoing investigation into corruption and other criminal activities at the highest levels. The committee also noted that the rule of law is being upheld absolutely, even though certain provisions of the Constitution and of certain laws are restricted to facilitate the ongoing investigation into corruption and other criminal activities as a necessity, given the role of the judiciary in the investigative process. However, the committee added that, regardless of the investigation, inderogable rights are guaranteed under the Constitution and are being upheld. Grave concerns regarding the impact of reckless statements by foreign stakeholders were also expressed by the Ministerial Committee. In this regard, the committee highlighted the spread of purposefully false information by the political opposition in an effort to misrepresent the facts on the ground in Maldives creates an undue burden upon the people of Maldives as well as businesses operating in the country. The committee expressed its hope that as an intergovernmental body, the United Nations would consult more closely with the government to such efforts. The delegation welcomed the open engagement of the government with the United Nations system and commended the Maldives and its people for its consistent attitude towards respecting every one of its citizens, including those who are incarcerated. The Ministerial Committee, led by Minister of Education Dr. Aisha Shiham, consists of Ministers of Youth and Sports Irtisham Adam, Minister of Environment and Energy Tariq Ibrahim, and Minister of Health Abdullah Nazim Ibrahim, Minister of Housing and Infrastructure Dr. Muhammad Muiz. A technical team supporting the Ministerial Committee, led by Foreign Secretary of Maldives Ahmad Sarir, was also in attendance. Maldives Police Service dismisses claims regarding the number of individuals taken into custody during the recent illegal protest held by the opposition coalition, noting that it has come to the attention of the Institute that there has been some false information circulating regarding the number of individuals taken into custody. Maldives Police reveals that as a total of 7 individuals were taken into custody for obstruction of police duty on February 16th and 17th. Superintendent of Police Ahmad Shifan stated that no arrests were made due to protesting, but the individuals were arrested for the obstruction of police duty. The spokesperson of Maldives Police Service further added that the arrests were made in accordance to the court orders and inderogable rights would be guaranteed to the detainees. Maldives Broadcasting Commission notes that some local media agencies have been exercising the freedom of press in ways which boost the attempts of the opposition coalition to topple the constitutionally elected government. In a statement, the Broadcasting Commission highlighted that some media agencies have been practicing the right of freedom in ways which tarnishes the images of government authorities. According to the Commission, live protests were covered by media agencies in an effort to create fear and hatred in the public. The Broadcasting Commission called on all local media agencies to refrain from committing any action which is against the true aspects of journalism and further called to abide by the limits allowed by the freedom of press by the Constitution of Maldives. Furthermore, the Commission said media agencies have to take full responsibility of any broadcast content which is against the Constitution and warned that strict action would be taken regarding such content. Ministry of Education commences an education sector analysis workshop to develop a strategic action plan for the next 5 years.
The workshop named Education Sector Plan 2018 to 2022 is being carried out with the assistance of Global Partner for Education Fund. Education Ministry reveals that during the workshop, several papers focusing on different subjects will be presented for discussions. In this regard, papers related to the existing situation of the education sector, enhancing the sector, education for children with special needs, and inclusive education will be discussed widely in the workshop. Speaking about the workshop, Minister of State for Education Ahmed Shafiu said the workshop will enable to further understand the school management system. Education Ministry said it hopes to complete the collection of information needed from the Strategic Action Plan by March. The Ministry will collect information from schools in Malé area and in atolls. The workshop, facilitated by experts, is attended by 60 participants from schools, colleges, universities, United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF, United Nations Development Programme UNDP, and non-governmental organizations.
Managing Director of Housing Development Corporation HDC, Mohammed Simon, reveals plans to populate in the second phase of Urmale within this year. The HIA project, initiated in the second phase of Urmale, is touted as the biggest housing development project ever to be conducted in the Maldives.
The administration of President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Qayyum has planned to relocate and settle 70% of the country's population in Urmale. Under this objective, 240 hectares of land were reclaimed in the second phase of Urmale Urban Development Project, adding to the 188 hectares reclaimed in 2002. In an exclusive interview with PSM News, Managing Director of Housing Development Corporation HDC, Mohammed Simon, revealed efforts to mobilize the worksite to construct 7,000 housing units has now been completed, and further added that all construction materials has now arrived in Maldives. Continuing on, Simon said work to develop roads, water and sewerage pipelines for the housing units have commenced as per the given timeline. Simon stated that the 7,000 housing units would be completed with additional services developed, such as parking lots and commercial spaces. He revealed that HDC plans to populate the second phase of Urmale within this year. In addition to these housing units, HDC also commenced the construction of accommodation towers with the participation of state companies and government offices under HIA project. President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Qayyum and First Lady Fathat Ibrahim inaugurated the HIA housing project as part of the administration's housing policy to solve congestion issues in Maldives. A total of 10,080 housing units will be developed in 36 towers, which would include apartments of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. While the construction of social housing units in the second phase has now commenced in bold speed, over 20 companies have been contracted to construct housing units under the real estate schemes in the first phase.
Tourism sector of the Maldives records a significant growth of 7.8% last year.
According to statistics, the tourism sector received a revenue of $2.34 billion. This is recorded as an increase of 7.8% compared to the $2.14 billion the sector received the previous year. According to statistics published by Maldives Inland Revenue Authority (MIRA), it received more than $280 million as tourism goods and services tax (TGST). Last year, more than 1.3 million tourists arrived in Maldives, which is an increase of 8% compared to the records of 2016. While the revenue received from tourist sector increased last year, it is noteworthy that the government exerts major efforts to enhance the tourism industry. One vital project conducted by the government is the expansion of Velana International Airport at a cost of $1 billion. The government expects the revenue from tourism sector to increase to $8 billion upon completion of the airport expansion project, which would enable the authorities to serve 7.5 billion people a year.
And now we'll look into the latest news updates from international arena. Saudi Arabia welcomes a draft United Nations resolution offered by Britain, the United States and France that would condemn Iran for failing to stop its ballistic missiles from falling into the hands of Yemen's Houthi group.
Saudi Foreign Minister Adil Al-Jubeir told Reuters the measure, if passed, would help hold Iran accountable for its exports of ballistic missiles to the Iran-backed Houthi rebels and radical and aggressive behavior in the region, including support for terrorist groups.
I believe the UN must support this. Iran's behavior is outrageous and unacceptable. Iran is in violation of the UN resolutions with regards to ballistic missiles. It exports ballistic missiles to the Houthis, who then use it to target civilians inside Yemen as well as inside Saudi Arabia. Iran is in violation of international law with regard to its support for terrorism. And Iran has not lived up to the commitments, we believe, of the nuclear deal. So Iran must be held accountable.
A proxy war is playing out in Yemen between Iran and US ally Saudi Arabia. A Saudi-led coalition intervened in Yemen in 2015, backing government forces fighting Iran-allied Houthi rebels. Al-Jubeir also called for changes to two aspects of the 2015 nuclear accord with Iran, which include a cancellation of a so-called sunset provision and expanded inspections to include non-declared and military sites. The draft United Nations resolution, which needs to be adopted by February 26th, is likely to face a resistance from Russia. A resolution needs 9 votes in favor and no vetoes by Russia, China and the United States, France or Britain to pass. Al-Jubeir said he hoped Russia could be persuaded to support the measure. The draft text to renew United Nations sanctions on Yemen for another year would also allow the 15-member council to impose targeted sanctions for any activity related to the use of ballistic missiles in Yemen. Diplomats said Britain drafted the resolution in consultation with the United States and France before giving it to the full council on Friday.
In sports, Borussia Dortmund's gifted attacking midfielder Marco Reus scores his first goal since returning from an 8-month injury layoff to earn a 1-0 win at Borussia Mönchengladbach in the Bundesliga.
The 28-year-old Marco Reus struck in the 32nd minute with a shot that went in off the underside of the bar after Andre Schwale and Mario Götze combined to provide the opening. Borussia Mönchengladbach were agonizingly close to an equalizer in the 55th minute when Lars Stindl's shot was parried by goalkeeper Roman Buaki, and Raul Bobadilla's effort from the rebound was cleared off the line by Socrates Papastatopoulos. At the other end, Reus saw his fine shot saved by Jan Sommer following a 61st minute corner. Dortmund climbed to second place with 40 points from 23 games, though they will be overhauled if RB Leipzig, who are 2 points behind, win at Eintracht Frankfurt. Bayern Munich have a 19-point lead at the top.
Black Panther makes its huge box office debut during the US President's Day weekend from Friday through Monday. Let's have a look.
The world is changing. And the conquerors.
According to boxofficemojo.com, Black Panther came first with estimated ticket sales of $192 million. Coming in at second place is Peter Rabbit. The children's film ranked in $17.25 million over the weekend. 50 Shades Freed landed at third with an estimated $16.9 million. Rounding out the top 5 are Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle with a $7.9 million haul. Clint Eastwood's The 1517 to Paris finished 5th with a $7.7 million haul over the 3-day weekend.
With that, we conclude the news for this bulletin. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant day ahead. Bye-bye.